Hello, my name is Juan Carlos Aguirre.
And I'm Sally Chavez, and today we'll be discussing W.E.B. Du Bois and his impact on American society and education.
William Edward Burghardt Du Bois was born on February 23, 1868 in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. He was born as a free black man to Mary Burghardt and Alfred Du Bois. Du Bois was born during the Reconstruction era and soon made it his life's mission to continue the advancement of all blacks for generations to come. He established himself as one of the most well-known black figures in our country's history. Throughout his life, he was a historian, educator, author, poet, sociologist, and American civil rights activist. With over 4,000 written works, Du Bois covered many social, economic, and political issues that we still see evident today. During his childhood years, Du Bois received exceptional education, such as college lessons throughout his high school years at a racially integrated school. Du Bois went on to graduate valedictorian of his high school and also became the first African American to graduate as well. Du Bois then went on to attend Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, where he graduated with a Bachelor in Arts in 1888. After becoming a college graduate, Du Bois didn't stop there and further continued his education, which led him to receiving his PhD from Harvard University and once again making history as one of the first African Americans to do so. The following year, Du Bois wrote The Philadelphia Negro, a social study, which was the very first study of its kind since it entailed descriptions of the lives of African Americans who lived in the slums of Philadelphia's 7th Ward District. While Du Bois conducted his research, he found that the majority of black lives were plagued with illiteracy, crime, and poverty. The publication of such a unique and astounding case study established Du Bois as one of the most influential scholars of black life in America. Du Bois continued on his journey to find an answer to the massive discrimination of blacks in America. One of the most influential parts of Du Bois' life was when he, along with 60 other prominent blacks, gathered together on President Lincoln's birthday and created the NAACP, the National Association for Advancement of Colored People. The NAACP was formed around the central belief that all Americans are inherently entitled to equal rights, and that it is the responsibility of the people being oppressed to form nonviolent protests and pursue legal action in order to ensure equality. This organization catapulted various court cases that helped the advancement of minorities across the United States. This organization alone has impacted education in terms of desegregation, social equality, and higher education for African Americans. To further combat the racism and discrimination in the U.S., Du Bois looked to social science for answers. He taught in Atlanta between 1898 and 1910. It is in these years where Du Bois wrote more of his prominent works, such as The Study of the Negro Problem. This book speaks of how free blacks coped with cultural identity, white oppression, and work, or lack thereof, thus creating the factors that pressured blacks to move into the lucrative career of organized crime. Du Bois's primary focus on this subject was typically segregation, political disfranchisement, and how to improve the African American way of life. It is in this book where Du Bois introduces the term talented tenth, a phrase that he references many times in his later writings. He explains that the talented tenth is an educated and elite African American who could lead their brethren into a better future. This book allowed people during this era to view and understand African Americans in an entirely different light. It showed America that the biggest problem in the US was not blacks, but society and its unequal social construction. This ideology meant that the best of each race, who have the ability to guide the masses away from further contamination and poverty, are responsible for the future of their fellow man.
Shortly thereafter, Du Bois wrote his most popular book called The Souls of Black Folk. It was here where Du Bois painted a picture of what it felt like to be a part of America's so-called black problem. He talks about the difficulties of being African American and what it was like to be a black man in America during this time period. The three reoccurring subjects in this book are the talented tenth, double consciousness, and the veil. Double consciousness refers to the combined sense of national identity as a black person and as an American citizen. This alluded to the hardship of living in white America and having your racial identity rejected. The veil describes the average life of an African American beyond the color of their skin according to what conditions they grew up in, lived in, worked in, and even slept in. The souls of the black folk reinforced the idea that African Americans were not the problem and impacted the U.S. in terms of education, social interactions, and leadership. In addition, Dubois used this particular work as a platform to take a stance against the ideology of Booker T. Washington. Washington firmly believed that blacks needed to work hard and earn the respect of whites. Dubois believed that blacks did not need to prove themselves to whites in hopes of receiving equality in return. He wholeheartedly believed that black education should be focused more on educating the future black leaders of our country. He rejected the idea and formation of the Hampton-Tuskegee model. Booker T. Washington was one of the people who spearheaded this model for black education. Under this model, black education was solely focused on blacks receiving training and preparing them for the workforce. This model placed no emphasis on classical and traditional education that whites received. It is for this reason that he supported schools such as Atlanta and Wilberforce, due to the fact that these schools provided adequate and classical education versus vocational education. Du Bois also used the NAACP to win pivotal Supreme Court cases in the field of education. One that completely changed the public school systems in the U.S. was Brown versus Board of Education. This Supreme Court case ruled that it was unconstitutional for schools to be segregated, in part because most black schools were not up to the same standards as white schools. In addition, the Supreme Court case overruled Plessy versus Ferguson, which originally supported segregation of public schools as long as they were equal. Du Bois began to gain momentum from his tireless efforts, and he was soon crowded with an outstanding number of supporters, all behind his views on black education equality. Du Bois's impact on education has still profoundly affected school children, even in today's classrooms. Du Bois was an advocate who rejected the idea of the Western canon focus in classrooms and strongly fought for multicultural education. He felt that all cultures, even black culture, was important to integrate into classrooms so it can teach children about tolerance and acceptance of all cultures. After renouncing his citizenship to the U.S. and joining the Communist Party in 1962, Du Bois passed away at the age of 95 on the eve of the Civil Rights March in Washington, D.C. Since his passing, Du Bois's impact on education can even be seen through his Du Bois Consortium of charter schools all across Memphis, Tennessee. In addition, his impact still lingers throughout America's classrooms through the integration of multiculturalistic curriculum. This kind of curriculum challenges traditionalistic European-centered ideas.